Does Wuthering Waves need more co-op content? Well, yes, but not right now. Let me explain. If you've ever tried pressing this funny little button up in the top left, you'd find the co-op mode. But co-op features in gacha games aren't exactly a novel feature. Fate Grand Order had server-wide raid stages for players to farm and earn rewards together based on hitting collective checkpoints. Punishing Grey Raven had a limited-time monster hunter-like game mode where you queue up with other players and fight giant monsters while performing cool mid-air finishers with your team. Some people's fondest memories of Genshin Impact were running around doing world bosses with other people and playing meme teams like 4 Yelans on the same team. Wuthering Waves, taking big inspiration from games like Genshin Impact, naturally emulated a lot of elements from Genshin's co-op experience where you can enter other people's worlds and fight stuff together and just have an all-around good time. The biggest difference in Wuthering Waves is that when you kill things in the overworld, you can also drop equipment that you can use to gear your characters, meaning that if you really felt like it, you could actually enter your buddy's world and farm together and potentially get something useful for your progression. This does sound like a major improvement and changes everything, right? Well, yes, but only for the first few days or so. You see, the gearing and ecosystem in Wuthering Waves suffers from an issue that plagues all gacha games, the resource drought. I've been playing since launch, and a month into the game, I'm really feeling the weight of not having enough tuners, echo experience, or wave plates to gear my characters. Now I can continue to inject my daily dose of copium that the resource gains will get better as I progress my account and world level, but the fact of the matter is that gacha games as a business model work hand in hand with resource constraints and resource droughts. So going back to the co-op experience, even if you join someone's world and you get a good echo drop with the right main stat, because of this overbearing resource drought, you might not even have enough materials to level it up and tell if it's an upgrade, which takes away from that potential excitement and dopamine rush. And you're kind of left feeling like the amount of time you spent joining someone's world, running around fighting mobs, and spending your hard-earned resources to level up that piece of gear is very disproportionate to the satisfaction you might get from the usefulness of that extra piece. Assuming, by the way, it doesn't completely roll like garbage. And over time, because you're aware of this disparity in time spent to enjoyment, is your time really best spent engaging with it? And therein lies the problem with Wuthering Waves' co-op experience. There's just not enough variety in what you can do in the co-op mode, seeing as how majority of the time you're either doing co-op just to run around and chill with your buddies or farm for extra echoes. And there's too much variance in how much time you spend compared to how satisfied and happy you feel at the end of it, making it very easy to feel unrewarding or unmotivating to engage with it in the future. And it's such a shame because I feel like it's such an underutilized feature that can really make the world, the game, and the players that are enjoying the game with you feel just a little more connected and a little less isolated and lonely. It feels a little stale and empty that once you reach a certain point in the game, 99% of your experience with the game is spent in your own world and isolated to the specific zones you do your dailies in. So if I feel so strongly about the issues with the co-op experience, why did I say Wuthering Waves didn't need more co-op content right now? Well, it really boils down to a few reasons. The first one is pretty simple and straightforward. It's all about prioritizing the bigger issues that the game needs to address. Now that we're a month into the game, we can pretty confidently look back and say that the game was launched in a pretty rough state and still has a lot of kinks to iron out. Things ranging from optimization issues turning people's phones into fully heated cast irons, to the camera zooming in randomly while you're in combat, enemy targeting issues making combat feel janky and uncomfortable, to even voice direction issues making the story feel less immersive and engaging. If I'm being completely honest, the co-op experience will ultimately be something that's optional, miscellaneous, and does not affect as many people as the core gameplay and performance issues. With that in mind, I'd much rather Kuro focus their efforts to tackle the more pressing issues before they work on optional side content like the co-op experience. The second reason is all about balancing incentive with potential FOMO or fear of missing out. The thing that we need to understand is that gacha games primarily cater to an audience that enjoys a play fast and log off routine. This isn't like Path of Exile where you can wake up and run maps until the sun goes down. This isn't your typical MMO raid that could take upwards of hours to run through all the stages. A big appeal of gacha games compared to games like PoE and Lost Ark is that you can get into a consistent routine where you can choose when you want to log on, burn your daily energy in less than 15 minutes, and come back 24 hours later to do it all again. Because of this, the content of gacha games have always been very single player focused, to not go against this play whenever and however long you want philosophy. But the moment you introduce something where you might need to play with randoms, it goes against the biggest reason gacha games are so appealing to a casual audience in the first place. What ends up happening is that the developers will throw in pulling currency or leveling materials to incentivize players to engage in this new co-op content, but this will inherently cause FOMO and indirectly get players to either break their routine to play when when co-op is more active, sit in queue for an unknown amount of time and have to play and potentially compete against people in a game that until recently was a completely single player experience for them. But does that mean there's too much risk involved with co-op content and it causing friction with their core demographic? Not necessarily. I think no matter how or when they implement this co-op content, it will always have concerns over potential FOMO. But what they can influence is the context and the presentation surrounding it. That's why I say Wuthering Waves shouldn't build on its co-op content right now. One of the biggest factors that will influence how people perceive this brand new co-op content is the timing of its release. What do I mean by this? Let's take Honkai Star Rail's recent Origami Bird Clash event for example. Up until this patch, we've had virtually no content that allows us to interact with other players, and yet this Candy Crush-like game mode was pretty positively received. But why? I think there's a couple of reasons. The first is that it was accompanying a much bigger content expansion in the Divergent universe, as well as a permanent new endgame mode in the Apocalyptic Shadow, meaning that the gameplay loop and rewards tied to this PvP event feel more like a neat add-on to the overall content package than a core focus of it. The second is the reward structure. Hoyoverse has deliberately designed the reward levels to where you can pretty much get all the rewards from the PvP section in 2 to 3 games, or just under 30 minutes, and anything beyond that gives minimal rewards and it's pretty much just you playing because you enjoy the gameplay. Meaning that if you're not particularly keen on competing against other players or interacting with randoms, it requires little time investment to get in and get out with what you need. The third and final thing is the timing and placement of this event in the game's lifespan. As I said before, it took a bit over a year for HSR to release its first co-op or PvP content, but between that time, it's developed a very consistent pattern of event content and rewards. By this point in the game, people can pretty much predict what sort of content we'll be getting in the future patches, as in one flagship event, one combat event, one double drops event, something like that. And from that, they can also predict how many rewards they can get per patch. These things all reduce the FOMO tied to co-op events because it tells us that they can inherently serve as neat add-ons to the bigger, more important content in the update, and they're likely one-off things that won't be frequently revisited. So what can Wuthering Waves emulate from HSR? They don't necessarily have to make their own version of Candy Crush. What I think they can really take away is to build up a much more consistent and solid pattern of content updates and rewards so that players can at least feel reassured that these forced co-op content are one-off and just nice add-ons to the bigger content updates. It would feel a lot weirder if they released a brand new co-op mode in version 1.2 than in version 2.0, because at that point in the game's lifespan, there'd be too much uncertainty if the rewards tied to the forced co-op modes are substantial relative to how much we get per patch, and whether this will be a continuous direction of content that the game will want to pursue in their later updates. That's why I think we should give Kuro at least half a year to build up a rhythm and pattern of updates, rewards, and content style so that there's less uncertainty involved when they decide to release something that will eventually break that mold. The third and final reason why I think Wuthering Waves shouldn't touch their co-op content right now is all about resolving an identity crisis. What I mean is Wuthering Waves needs to establish a much stronger identity in terms of their main event content before they touch co-op modes that may be very hit or miss. The events in 1.0 and 1.1 were very nice and serviceable, but they're not particularly memorable. Will I look back in a year's time and fondly remember that one parkour event, that one photography event, or that one combat event from 1.0? Probably not. This is quite a big difference compared to games like HSR, where even months down the line, people still fondly remember events like Ethereum Wars and the ghost hunting event from several patches ago. It shows that Wuthering Waves still has a long way to go before they reach that level of quality that their competitors are putting out. Wuthering Waves should at the very least heavily prioritize upping the quality and uniqueness of their main event content before working on their co-op content. Give us more unique and fresh gameplay mechanics that aren't just rehashes of pre-existing puzzles. Include a wider variety of concepts that aren't just combat related. Give us more storyline based events so that people can also enjoy the more silly and lighthearted character interactions that we don't get to see in the more serious main story quests. The point is, would you rather have to choose between a forced co-op event and a photography event, or between a forced co-op event and an exciting new Gullpuff racing sim? Earlier I said we want to minimize FOMO by making the co-op feel as much like an add-on to other new content. So what Wuthering Waves needs to do is to really establish the identity and quality of that other content so that people don't feel so bad for skipping that forced co-op stuff, because at least they'd be reassured that the patch will still have a lot of high quality event content that's fresh and probably more fun for them. That's going to do it for this video. These are just some of my thoughts on the current problems facing Wuthering Waves' co-op mode. some of the bigger picture considerations for why the game shouldn't rush to improve that one part of the gameplay so soon. Let me know down in the comments what you think though. What have been your experiences with the co-op mode in Wuthering Waves? What do you think about my bigger picture concerns with Wuthering Waves' flagship events? And what sort of co-op content or events would you like to see in Wuthering Waves? I'd personally be super down for a PvP Gulpuff racing event or a top-down Bloons tower defense like game mode. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts though. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next one.